Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, back at it again, and I'm doing a bone shaker, which was one of the very first videos I did when I started this channel. Oh, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Anyways, I've got a bunch of parts that I'm kind of playing around with here. I don't end up using this motor for a couple different reasons. In hindsight, I probably could have ended up because I ended up shifting the front wheels forward, but that's for a later point. There's some real riders that I've got, bigs and smalls. And this is my first video back, so this is more just to kind of get my feet wet again. I haven't honed my skills while I was gone. I actually haven't really touched anything. The basic crap that you normally do, you drill out the cars, the posts on the bottom. I want the wing off this green car, so I'm going to open this up just for that particular reason, just so I can steal the wing off of it. And as I was saying, sometimes on these projects, it goes a few different ways. One, it could go perfectly. Two, you end up changing on the fly. And three, in this case, it came out as I envisioned. I just really wasn't satisfied with my vision, I guess. It did come out perfect to what I expected it to do in the end, but it's just one of those things that my vision sucked. So here I am. I cut the gas tank off. All I want is the interior. So I'm cutting the motor off and the skull, because I might be able to use that on some other project down the road. I don't throw anything away. And I'm cutting the nose off because I want to put a bigger motor in there, and in true roadster fashion, really you don't have hoods. So after I cut it off, I've got to smooth it out as flat as I can get it all the way around, because I'm going to have to fill in that firewall with styrene. So I want to have a fairly flat surface to work with. So the wheels, I could have cut the wheel axles and made them longer or wider, excuse me. But I kind of liked the separation that was between them. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the chassis. And I'm going to cut these I call them brake drums, off the front. And in the back, I've got to narrow it a little bit. So I'm going to cut in about 1/8 of an inch on each side. And what that does is it allows me to use the exact axles that I have without having to cut them and make axle tubes and all this other crap. And because I'm not using the bed on the truck, it's not going to interfere with anything. I tend to use a Dremel a lot. You could do the same thing with a jeweler's saw, which I do own. I just don't use very often. Same thing with the back. After I cut the bed off, I've got to file that as smooth as I can get it, because once again, same thing as the front. I'm going to fill in the necessary gaps with real thin styrene, and that way the cab can sit on the frame, and the interior actually sits on the frame, and then the cab sits on the interior. So for where the motor is going to go, I'm going to file that smooth. There's a little, you can kind of see it there. It's about a 1/2 inch long, maybe a 1/16 or a third, maybe an 1/8 sticking up for where the motor was originally. I want that area smooth because it was making the motor not sit flush. So I got to sand that down. In that way, it gives me a nice, good area to work with. So you can see right there what I did on that white piece of styrene you see. That's on the interior. That's so that the interior can actually bottom out on the cab. That's not my firewall. I still have to make that. And that's kind of what I'm going to do right here. And there's a little bit of a U right at the top. I could probably grind that down a little bit, but that's going to be a ton of work, which I really didn't want to do. So I'm just going to glue a piece of styrene on. And then what I'm going to do is I'll fill it in with body putty, because it's just it's a minuscule gap. And as much as I like a good gap, that's not something I want to see in my bone shaker. So I'm just going to glue this piece on, and then I'll trim it and file it to fit. That way I'm not trying to cut it exact. This is one of those instances where you can just overcut it and then file to suit whatever size you need. And not only do I have to do the sides, but I have to go up a little bit on the bottom part of the firewall so that it sits a little bit of a rake on the cab as it sits on the frame. And little files like this come in really handy. I can't explain enough how great they are and useful they are in this hobby. This is some sandpaper that I'm using. Well, it's not paper, but I call them the sanding sponge, and I use them for model kits. Works out really good. They come in different grits. I'm using 400 right now. I didn't strip the body because it didn't really need it. I sanded it down, and then I'm going to use this spot body putty, which is more like a glazing putty, just to fill in my gaps. And then I'm going to prime, and then I'll paint. I didn't feel the need to go all the way down to bare metal. I cleaned out the body lines with an X-Acto knife and cut them a little deep. So, and I want to go, at this point, I was kind of debating on whether I was just going to go with like a flat black primer. And I kind of decided to go with a flat copper color instead. So it wasn't going to have a clear coat on it regardless. So that was another reason why I didn't go crazy and strip the body. Plus, I wouldn't do it after I put the styrene on because then it would just dissolve. So here I'm just setting the wheels in. And I'm putting a oil drum in the back. And I figured I would rust it out. But to start with, I need a base color. So after priming this 55-gallon drum, I decided to paint it. I don't even know what color that's in. I use a combination of Citadel, Vallejo. I'm picking up a whole Army Painter kit. So I've got just random paints, and a lot of them were older paints that I was using when I was doing videos full time, and a lot of them are junk now. So I definitely need new paints. There you can see I've got a grill, the black piece right by the Raw Speed logo. That is going to be my grill shell with a moon tank, and I'll paint the moon tank aluminum here in a couple minutes, but I'm going to do the interior. And I thought two-tone would look kind of cool, so I'm going to go black and then bronze copper color for the inserts on the seats and some of the highlights. And it works out well. I think it looks good, and it sets the, I don't know, it ties the whole thing together. And again, this did not come out exactly how I wanted it. I usually slam everything I have to the ground. And this, I thought I'd kind of go with a faux gasser look and have the nose raised a little bit more, but not obscene like a gasser. I mean, I accomplished it, but I just don't like it. It's one of those things that I think I could have, maybe it's just me because I like everything slammed, and I went outside what I normally do, and shame on me. But again, first video back, I had zero expectations. Hell, I'm still trying to figure out my video settings and everything, and as it was, I got my frames per second completely wrong. So for rusting, I'm using this U-Rust kit. This stuff is awesome. And I'm using a black oxide, which I'm going to paint the drum with. I'm just going to apply that literally with a crap brush I have. And then once that dries, I let it dry overnight, but it dries within, I don't know, 45 minutes. It gives you two rust reactors, and it's literally almost rust. And one is a lighter blue than a darker blue, and they both dry a little different. And as long as you shake everything up really well, I wanted to left out in the, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I was after a certain look. So, you know, like when rust happens on brass, let's say, or copper, and it kind of has that greenish tint. That's kind of the look I was kind of going for. So I put this on, and instead of waiting for it to dry, I used a heat gun to kind of dry it a little bit. I still got the rust look, and I got some of that green oxide, I want to say moldy look, but it came out exactly how I wanted it. There's a lot of ways you can play around with this. You can mix the two colors. Mix the two reactors, which is the blues, like I'm doing. You can use just one, you can do both, you can do the dark one, you can do whatever you want, and you get different looks. Depends on what you use for a base coat as well. So I find browns work a little bit better, or a rust color, like a hot rod red primer type of look. So there you can see my copper inserts with my seats. I got my wing mounted, which I wish I would have put higher, but I was kind of going for that bone speeder look, but on a shaker. I painted the insert of the grill like a dark gray, and I left the grill shell black. If you've ever worked on a 32 Ford and you buy a Repo 32 grill shell, they come black. So I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, that's one of those things you never get. You never get an old car with a good grill shell, so you'd buy a new one. I just thought it looked kind of cool. Again, not my favorite build. It came out exactly how I wanted it to. You guys get to hand my first video back. Give me a break. I get some cool crap coming up. I hope you have a little bit of patience with me, and I'll catch you on the next one.